guess these are the points that all of us have talked about, but I leave in the room because maybe we want to ask some questions. Number one is clearly around geopolitics and energy security. And earlier on in this presentation, I talked about the need for regionalization, the need to recognize that it's time for this region to grow up in terms of working together and developing a regional energy strategy in competition to the likes of China and India that are now the elephants. And unless we wake up to that quickly and recognize that we are in competition as a region with these markets within the energy space, we're going to lose the race. Temper energy demand growth. And this is a very important piece as well. We are growing to TOTSI, but I think a lot of people in this room, particularly those involved in energy management, including Jeff on the front row here and various other people, is there's a hell of a lot of room for energy efficiency. And yes, limiting emissions, but actually cutting down the way we use energy. And one of them is not only about energy efficiency, looking at what we can do from a process engineering point of view, which of course we all do, but just in terms of the way we connect energy with each other. So back to industries and how industries actually go forwards in terms of low carbon paths that we talked offline. At the end of the day, if we want to attract the industry of the future, we need low carbon solutions. The way industry, like let's take a data center, or an Apple, or whoever it might be, who wants a low carbon center of the future, is they want to be able to basically maximize and decarbonize as much as possible. So how do we use that heat, for example, from a data center to do something useful in another industry? It's not just about refining and petrochemicals, it's about how we interconnect all of these industries in a different way. So let's start thinking about industry the way we think about smart cities. How do we connect infrastructure? How do we connect different industry sectors that are not used to working together in different ways? Those are the sorts of challenges that we need to start thinking about in terms of tempering demand growth and creating those efficiencies as best we can. The third one is energy mix and the legacy of fossil fuels. And I leave in the room day one of SEW. And our great champion from Saudi Aramco who stood up and said what he said, which I think embarrassed a lot of people, senior people in Singapore, about how great oil and gas is, and you shouldn't do anything in renewables until it gets cheaper. To my mind, I think we need to address that issue. We need to address the fact that the oil and gas industry is not going to change. It's not going to spend the necessary money to develop the new sort of infrastructure that the energy transition needs. It's about us time to wake up and say we need a different solution. And we need to develop that new different solution in an integrated way, in competition to the oil and gas industry. Okay, so at the end of the day, we need to drive a different set of regulatory frameworks that begin to wake up and actually reflect the facts of life and the statistics, which are very clear in terms of the way we need to move forwards. And of course, tied into that is how do we invest? How do we actually bring the necessary money to create that infrastructure change? We talk about blended finance, but if you go to speak to the bank, yes, they'll look at public-private blended finance, but bank structures and bank investments today still reflect old industry. They don't reflect a new way of looking at industry, a new way of actually basically integrating infrastructure together. Nearly finished. That really boils down to thinking about infrastructure, okay? Because back to Saudi Aramco's comments, which were basically that oil and gas is cheaper than renewables. The answer is in many cases it is, not always. But the reason it's cheaper and will remain and will, oil and gas looks much better is because they have developed infrastructure behind them, right? Who's going to invest in building the infrastructure that will actually make renewables actually more economically efficient? That's got to be filled. And that infrastructure development piece is actually the key and critical factor in this sort of this. Finally, technology and one more. Technology and innovation, very important, because obviously, again, how do we do that? Singapore does a lot of that work, back to collaboration. The challenge is, Singapore hasn't got all the answers, Malaysia hasn't got all the answers, the UK hasn't got all the answers, America hasn't got all the answers. We need to be better at collaborating. And yet, when you go to universities, and I'm pointing at Jeff here because he's a university, they're hopeless at dealing with IP. Everybody wants to protect their own intellectual capital instead of saying, let's collaborate. So NTU, NSU, NTU, Cambridge, wherever you might be, wake up to the need to start being more collaborative. Very important. And that boils down to international collaboration. So here I am from the UK Energy Institute saying very clearly, the UK doesn't have all the answers, the US doesn't have all the answers. We will have to work together to come up with those answers. And I'll leave it with that, open the questions, and we're off and running. Thank you very much.